Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live episode of Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson, and today we are going to be talking about some more cool GitHub stuff. This time we're focused on GitHub Actions and how you can use that to automate your builds, your tests, and your deployments. So joining me today to talk about that is Josh. Hey, Josh. How are you doing?
Hey, everyone. Hi, Leslie. How's it going?
I'm good. Enjoying a pretty chilly, rainy Monday in Seattle, as always. It
Yep.
looks like you're chilling in a very cozy GitHub
Yeah,
library.
very, very warm.
Awesome. Looks very, very warm. So, Josh, can you tell us a bit about yourself so that you're not a stranger to the rest of us?
Yeah. Thank you. So my name is Josh Johanning. I am a DevOps architect at GitHub. I'm on the fast track team, so we work with customers for 1 to 2 to 3 weeks at a time, kind of helping them either onboard to GitHub or so use actions for the first time. So we see a wide variety of things, and I'm located in Madison, Wisconsin.
Awesome. Oh gosh, so it's probably much colder there than it is in
Yeah, it's the
Washington
thick of
now, right?
winter. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fair. Cool. So, just to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about what GitHub Actions is? I know it's fairly new. It came out a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah. So GitHub Actions, it's really come a long way too in the last couple of years for sure. Started with just a basic automation engine. Now we can do deploys and have approvals and things like that. So I guess a lot of people primarily think of it probably as like a CI/CD engine, like maybe comparing it to like Azure pipelines or something like that. Which is GitHub Actions definitely is a CI/CD engine, but it can also do a lot more things. So basically anything inside of the repository that happens, like a pull request is created or an issue is created, is an event that can drive a GitHub action workflow.
Awesome. So before we go in deep into that, heads up for the audience, if you have any questions about GitHub Actions as we're talking about it, feel free to drop them in the comments and we'll try our best to answer them. So Josh, I'm going to pass the reins to you and let you have at it.
All right, sounds great. Let's do it.
Cool.
All right, yes. So I have a repo here, and I'll put that in the chats, or Leslie can put it in the chats. One of us will, so you can follow along. It's a public repo, so feel free to bookmark it, save it, share the code. So I just have a few things I want to recap. So most of this is going to be just hands-on demo, million up. But my coworker Mickey Gusay, who's also on the fast track team, has a nice kind of intro slide deck that I like to start with when I'm talking about actions for the first time. So it has some good visuals on kind of how things work, especially if you're new to CI/CD in general, or if you're coming from another platform like Azure Pipelines or Jenkins or something like that. Maybe how GitHub Actions is different. So again, at the fundamental level, it's GitHub Actions is an automation engine, not just for CI/CD, but probably a lot of us are going to use it for CI/CD. The workflows are stored as YAML files. So that's going to be a little bit different if let's say you're using like the Azure Pipelines Classic Editor or just not familiar with YAML. They're stored as YAML files in the .github/workflows folder. So that's the only place that they're stored. When we're running a workflow, we see logs, so have a visualization, on different jobs and steps and stages. And the kind of the power of GitHub Actions is that I guess you could write your own PowerShell, your own shell scripts, bash scripts to automate what you want to do. But we also have a huge GitHub Actions marketplace that you can kind of pull in open source actions that other people have already built. So I wanted to show this page or this slide right here. So the key components of actions. So basically, like just at a high level, what are the sort of the main things that we're going to be talking about, the terms and kind of how things flow. So at the fundamentally, there are events that drive a workflow, and that workflow runs jobs on a runner. So there's different types of events. There's a whole page here. So if we Google GitHub events that trigger workflows, we can get to a page that has a list of every single event that can trigger a workflow. So we can see, an issue being opened, edited, deleted, a pull request, a push to main, etc. So there are a lot of different events. Push and pull requests are probably the main events that we'll probably use. But we're also going to add a workflow dispatch event to our workflow later to allow us to be able to queue the workflow manually.
Great. I'm loving this large list of options here.
Yeah.
I remember seeing GitHub Actions like when it was still pretty new and it was not that long of
right. Yep.
So.
It's very tricky, especially manually triggering a workflow at first was not possible. So yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool. So I'd imagine you can get pretty advanced with what you choose to automate.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah. So events, and then our main segmentation piece is called a workflow. So think of a workflow as like the YAML file itself. So that whole YAML file is a workflow. And then inside of that workflow, we have jobs, and we could either have just one job, very simply, or many jobs, dozens of jobs if we wanted to. And then we can configure those jobs to have kind of define their dependencies. So of course, like your deploy job has to depend on your build job to succeed in order to be able to deploy your app. And then inside of the job, we have steps. So note that the steps we can run like a simple like PowerShell or inline bash command, for example. But otherwise, we're going to be using actions, marketplace actions, open source actions that GitHub and other people have built. So not to confuse the what we're using here in a step as an action, not to confuse that with the overall product name of GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions is the product, and then we run our steps, our tasks. Those are actions that we run. And then our job, just like Azure Pipelines, it runs on runners. So in Azure Pipelines, it's called agents. In GitHub, they're called runners. So fundamentally, they act the same way. You can use GitHub hosted runners. If we have on the next slide, use GitHub hosted runners that are Ubuntu, Windows, and Mac OS hosted runners that have just a plethora, a slew of software installed on it. So it just most of the times it just works. Or you could run this inside of your own infrastructure on your laptop or a VM or a Kubernetes cluster, let's say. You can configure your own self-hosted runner that just runs inside of your environment. You have two options there.
Great. So is there is there a circumstance where you might want to choose one or the other?
Yeah, yep, and that's definitely a conversation we have with all of our customers who are using actions. There are some cases where you don't want to get into the VM management game and updating software and updating versions, updating the VM, or maybe configuring a Kubernetes cluster, for example, can't be complicated. So if you for the minimum, if it's not a complex application, or you want to just minimize complexity just in overall management overhead, the GitHub hosted runners are a great candidate for that because it's just a lot of times it just works. It has a lot of software already pre-installed on it. If we go to the GitHub hosted runners, about GitHub hosted runners, we can see what software is installed on there. Somewhere in here, there's about the GitHub hosted runners software. So available images. Yeah, this is what I want to go to. So, for example, if we want to use the Ubuntu latest image, we can click this link and then see all of the software that's installed on here. So it's obviously it's a really large list, and that just you don't have to figure out how to install Docker or anything else on your VM. It's just the GitHub hosted runner will have that. And then for self-hosted runners, there's definitely a lot of use cases for those as well. So maybe you're deploying to a private VNet, or you're deploying to an on-prem web server or something. Those are cases where you might need to use a self-hosted runner. Historically, the only way to use a GitHub hosted runner to deploy to a private network or private on-prem resource was to play with the firewall rules and add rules to the allow list. but we have a new feature with our GitHub larger hosted runners that you can link to. It's in beta. You can link it to an Azure, inject it to an Azure VNet. So you still can use GitHub hosted runners to deploy to a private network.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool. And then there are a few other components that we'll talk about as well. We can create secrets and also variables at our repository, and we can also create environments. So once we get closer to deploying our app to an environment, we'll create an environment where we can have environment-specific secrets and environment-specific variables, as well as approvals. Cool. So just very high level, that's what GitHub Actions is. To summarize, we have events that trigger workflows that reference actions.
Awesome. And then GitHub Actions is the bubble for all of that.
Exactly. Yes, GitHub Actions. Exactly. Yep. Cool. So yeah, let's. I'm gonna build my own action workflow from scratch essentially. So I also do want to talk about the marketplace first, though. So I'm gonna go to the GitHub marketplace. All right. So we have two drop downs in the GitHub marketplace: actions and apps. So we're focused on actions for our actions. So this is kind of like the task library, if you will, all the open source actions that are out here. We can see some of the actions here are from by actions. So those are by GitHub, and you can see it's verified by GitHub. If we search for Azure, there are going to be a ton of Azure actions that are by the created by GitHub and are the official Azure actions. But note that if I search, let's say Azure login, we'll use this action later. There are several Azure login actions, and we have the official one here with the checkbox. We also have other other actions that other people have created. Anyone can publish to the GitHub Actions Marketplace as long as it's a public repo. So you can see here these are non-verified actions from the marketplace. So when you're picking actions from the marketplace, it's a good idea to kind of understand just like any open source package you're choosing. Understand what you're consuming. Who is it created by? How is it maintained and supported? What type of open source license it is? Things like that. So you kind of think of it just as you're picking a NuGet package or an npm package. Same with the GitHub Actions action.
Sweet. And thanks for highlighting the GitHub Marketplace in general. By the way, I feel like I always forget that it exists sometimes, and I'm like, oh yeah, shoot, I should definitely start browsing over there. It's really cool.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there are a lot of times that like very simply you can do something with the command line and do it yourself. But oftentimes it's more convenient to use an action that's already pre-built and wrapped for you.
Yeah, save yourself the time and effort.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. And one final pro tip with the marketplace: if you search for something, like I search for test because I want to look at all the test actions out here. I like to modify the sort and go by most installed, or sorry, most starred is what it would be for actions if you star a repo. So this kind of gives you an idea of like what other people are using, like kind of basing stars on like usage and overall people like the tool. So if you find let's say a test reporter here with 491 stars, it's probably going to be better than one that has 0 stars. Or at least more people are using it.
There. Yep.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So yeah, I'm going to get into my action, create a new action. Is there any questions in the chat or anything that you have, Leslie, you think of?
No questions in the chat at the moment, and no additional questions on my end either. But I guess maybe a question for you personally: do you use any of the actions in the marketplace, or which ones are popular on your team, or anything like that?
Yeah. So if we're deploying to Azure, we'll use the Azure actions all the time for logging into Azure and deploying like a web app. So that's what I'm going to show today. I have a few published out here. If you search my name, I have a couple out here. Yeah. The ones that I just most recently updated were probably these two at the bottom. This action helps with linking pull requests, and I guess verifying or enforcing that pull requests are linked to work items in Azure boards. And then this other one here there's a whole concept of actions, kind of more advanced actions where you kind of have an issue that drives automation, but maybe you want to have an approval there. So I built an approval action there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, so everyone go download those.
yeah, use them in your workflows.
Yep. We love a good shameless self-plug.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to close that. So yes, I'm back to my repository here. So we can see it's a very simple repository. It just has a web project, has a test project. It's a .NET 6 application. So it doesn't do a whole lot. Just shows you've probably seen this demo before, the Tailspin space game web demo or web app. So it's a good use case, or good, just very simply to show how actions work. It's not too complex, and it'll help us or show us how we can build an action. All right. So first, I'm going to go to the Actions tab. If you don't see the Actions tab up here, it is likely that your actions have been disabled for this repository for whatever reason. If you're importing a repository, like if you're or forking a repository, it might be disabled. So if you don't see it, just go under Settings and then double check under Actions, under General, that actions aren't disabled. So mine are enabled. Then under Actions tab, so we could pull VS Code and just create that folder structure I mentioned before, the .github/workflows, and just create a new YAML file. So you don't have to go through the UI to create a new workflow. But I'm just going to show you this as just kind of a getting started place, especially if you're brand new to Actions. So it scans your repository's code and suggests a few different workflows that you can kind of use to get started. So if I was publishing like a Node.js package, like this would be a really good workflow for me to choose, and then just kind of gives me the overall the workflow for me that I can at least start with. And there's one out here for deploying a .NET Core app to an Azure web app, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing. So there's a lot of good starter workflows here that we can choose from and help you get started, especially if you're brand new to Actions. It's the hardest part is getting started. So if you can get something semi-working and then tweak it, I find that a lot easier.
Wholeheartedly agree. I feel like especially if you're new to Actions and YML files in general, I think getting started
for sure
daunting. So it's nice to have here's the pre-made one that we know works first. So once you add on to it, that's on you. It's not
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Cool. All right, so I'm going to search for the simple workflow. I like this one to help us get started. So I'm not going to use any pre-built one. That'd be too easy for us. So I'm going to use the simple one to help us just give us a base action structure, and then I can talk about it and we'll make our changes. So yeah, cool. First of all, so yeah, it's starting to make a file for me. So it's .github/workflows, just calling it blank.yaml. So I'll call this, .net.yaml, because that's my app. So we can give it a name. So I'll just kind of go through the overall kind of structure and syntax of the YAML. So just to help you kind of maybe pull some of the concepts that we talked about before, like triggers and jobs and steps and things like that. So hopefully some of these will start to make sense. But I'm going to change the name. Just call this, .NET Web App. So there's some comments here on the simple workflow that kind of tell us about what we're changing, which is nice. So the on keyword is our trigger keyword. So this tells us when the workflow should run. So again, the trigger mechanism. So I want to add one more here. And as a pro tip, and it even mentions it down here, you can use Control space or Command space to or Option space and on a Mac to kind of trigger or show some like syntax, like IntelliSense in a way. So I mentioned before, I want this to be able to run manually. So I'm going to run the workflow. I guess I could click through here. I want to do the workflow dispatch event. So it's probably at the way bottom, workflow dispatch. I guess maybe I'll just type it workflow dispatch. And I'm just going to leave it empty : like, oh, they already had it. That's why. Yeah, it's already had it. But yes. So that's the workflow dispatch event that allows us to be able to trigger it manually. And we could add inputs here, So if you ever want to like trigger a workflow, like your build manually and like, uncheck a box that says like run tests, you can have some logic keyed off of that, so that if uncheck, if run tests equals false, then of course don't run your tests. So you can do that as well with this.
Cool. And I love the IntelliSense that shows up here. Is that just for YAML files, or does that apply to most files in GitHub these days? I usually just I don't edit directly on the site.
Mostly just YAML files. There are some, and just browse, if you browse through like an app, sometimes it'll show some of the symbols for like a JavaScript based app. So some languages are better than others, but yeah, I usually work on VS Code myself as well.
Awesome. Yeah, because if I had one feature request on my end, I'd love to see like definitions for IntelliSense options that pop up.
For sure. Exactly. Yeah, some help, some more help there.
Yeah, but other than that, like that's a great to have. I'm glad that's there.
For sure. Yeah. And then if we do it at like it knows where you're at in the file. So with YAML, white space matters. So if I'm here, it's different than being at the high level, like here. So if I control space at the high level, I can see all the different parameters for at this level. So I can find like environment variables or define permissions that apply globally to all the jobs in my workflow.
Great.
Cool. All right. So I have my triggers. I'm just basically every time I push to main, it's going to run the workflow. Anytime I create a pull request to main, it's going to run a workflow. And anytime I can also run this manually. So I have one job here currently. Just job is the name of the job is called build. I could give it a friendly name with the name keyword. So I could just say build.net web app. Very simply. So this is kind of like the ID behind the scenes, and then this is like the display name, if you will. The runs on keyword, that's where it's targeting which runner to run on. So we talked about there's GitHub hosted runners and then self-hosted runners. So this is where this comes into play.
Gotcha.
So Ubuntu latest and like Windows latest and then like Mac OS latest. These would all be the latest versions of or using the latest Ubuntu, Windows, and Mac operating systems. You could change this to like self-hosted, and then this would bring in a self-hosted runner that you have on your repository.
Gotcha. And I'm assuming with the latest keyword that implies that you can pick and choose which.
Yep, exactly. So if I wanted to use like a different like Windows, like 2022, that's probably the latest. I could like choose with Windows 2018, for example, which would be a server 2019 environment.
Cool.
Something to kind of note, I'm gonna use a GitHub hosted runner, but if you're using a self-hosted runner, this is basically telling it which label to run on. So you can be very imprecise and then just say like, hey, just run this on any self-hosted runner that the repo has access to. Or I could say self-hosted, Windows, x64 or something. So you can be very precise based on the runners that are some of the labels are created automatically based on the OS and the architecture, and then some you can add yourself if you want to again be more precise. So basically, it's just an array of labels that it has to match in order for it to run a job on that runner.
Gotcha.
So I'll go back to Ubuntu latest, and then there are a few other things we'll add here eventually. But we can add an if condition so that if you don't want a job to run, you can create some logic there. Environment for environment variables. We will use the actual environment keyword for setting up our dev and prod environments later for approvals. And there's a few other things like timeout and continue on air and things like that. So there's a whole slew of options here. We don't have to use them all in all cases, but just know that they're there. So it allows you to get kind of more advanced when you need to. Cool. All right, then here are our steps. So this is the steps that are running inside of our job in our workflow. So most of the time, you're going to want to run the action/checkout action here, which is just a very simple action that just does a git clone on your repository, basically. So it's a very simple action. So that's all we need here.
That's interesting that it uses the word checkout and not clone. gonna get.
No, for sure. So like the other way you could do it, like if you wanted to write it yourself, you could write, git clone, and type it out yourself. But it's just one of those cases where it wraps it, so it knows which repository you're running from, and then just runs the checkout command or clone command.
Okay. It's nice that there's an option.
Yes, yep, for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we have a couple of one-liners here, or a couple of shell commands here that are just running an echo. So this is a single or an inline, single line script. And if you want to do a multi-line script, you can just use the pipe here, and then add your multi-line command to there. So awesome. I want to save this and run it. I want to show just how this looks. I'm going to create a branch, propose changes. So if I create my pull request, it should run because it's now a pull request to main. Yes, so it did run. So I'm going to go back and edit this in a second, but I just kind of want to show what we have so far, just with the base or the sample workflow. So we just have one job. So this build or summary page here is showing just our one job. Then inside of that job, we'll click it, and we can see the different steps. So we only had 3 steps. You notice that there's 6 little checkboxes here. Mm-hmm. Some steps have pre-steps, and some steps have post steps that run as well. So like the post step for actions checkout is just cleaning out the authentication to make sure that there's nothing left on the runner before it tears it down, and things like that. So, but otherwise, we're doing an actions checkout that we have, just cloning the repo. Here's the hash it's cloning. We're running our one-line script to echo hello world, and then we're running our multi-line script that had 2 bash commands in there. Cool. So very simple. That works. So we're just going to keep kind of working off of this. So I'm going to switch to my code space, and the reason I want to switch to my code space, I kind of want to simulate working inside of VS Code.
Okay.
So
I was going to ask. I did have a follow-up question with VS Code. That's perfect.
Yeah. Because I'll often work in VS Code when I'm iterating on a workflow. You can do everything in the web if you want. You can do everything in code if you want, but you can use both. So, all right. So let's let my code space spin up for a second. While that's loading, we can go back to the action. I mentioned a few things here from the actions interface now. So before, obviously, there's nothing here. Now, each workflow is going to show up on the left-hand side under where this .NET Web App workflow is. So you can have multiple workflow, multiple YAML files for your repository, and then they'll all show up here. So if you click on one, it'll show you just the runs for that workflow. So if you did have like 5 different workflows and you wanted to find the runs just for that one workflow, instead of having it filtered by all workflows, you can click and have it filtered by just the workflow that you care about, for example. And then you can see which branch it's tied to, and also like which event it's tied to. So it's saying this event ran from pull request number 1. So there's some nice kind of linking and traceability back to like actually what triggered this workflow run.
Great.
Cool. All right. So awesome. My workflow my code space is ready. The code space, I'm not going to go into what code spaces is too much in depth, but basically it's just VS Code with a compute environment, and it's running in the cloud. But this is just easier way to show than pulling up my VS Code and having the resolutions mismanaged. All right. So I want to check out my branch. Cool. All right. So I'm in my branch here. If you're new to Actions, or I guess even if you're not new to Actions, there's no reason why not. You should make sure that you go and find the GitHub Actions extension from the VS Code Marketplace and install that, because just like how the web browser had some IntelliSense when we were editing, the GitHub Actions extension will help have some that same IntelliSense, and also kind of give you the little squigglies when it thinks something is wrong. So this is very helpful to use.
Yeah, that was going to be my exact question. Like, is there an extension for this?
Oh yeah. And funny enough, it's relatively new within the last year or so.
Oh,
so that
shoot,
was yeah, it was difficult before if you'd have to do everything, just know how YAML works.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So I'm definitely glad that's there. I guess
Yeah.
on the counter side, is there anything like that available for Visual Studio, like the IDE?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. There might be, but I don't know.
Well, team, let's go investigate.
Yeah,
In the
exactly.
chat,
Yeah.
go try it out.
It'd be
Yeah,
it'd be worth a search in the VS the Visual Studio marketplace, just like the VS Code marketplace. But
yeah, totally.
yeah, cool. All right, so let's look at my file. So my workflow is in the .github/workflows. If you have the actions extension here, it'll show you there's a little actions tab here. This will pretty much show you just what the current, this is kind of a similar view to what we had before, or sorry, here, where I have like my one workflow here with my one job run. So same thing, I have my one workflow with my one job run. So same thing here. So it's just showing you just a little visualization, so you can kind of see if a job is in progress, kind of monitor it there. And also it shows you which secrets and environments it knows about for your repository. So you don't have to use this to edit, but this is just there for helping if things are running or not. But otherwise, yeah. So here's my workflow file. So again, the same one that we're just working on the web. If you can use the same IntelliSense to do the control space, and then you'll get the same list of resources depending on where you're at in your YAML file, which is very helpful. If you use like an environment variable that it doesn't know about, it'll often squiggly it. Of course, this is not working, it looks like, but all right, no worries. So I don't know why that's in there. So all right, we'll just work past that. So I want to add in a few steps that are specific to our .NET web app. So let's add in under checkout. We can remove some of these now, some of the placeholders. So let's just do run. We'll do .NET restore. I want to add a working directory because we noticed that my web project is in a subdirectory here. So let's add working directory, and if I do the control space, it helps me with the working directory. And then I can do tailspin .space game .web, which is my directory here that we're loading in from. And yeah, so that's my .NET restore command. So when it clones or checks out the repository, it's going to run all of the commands in the root here. So I could have specified, every command have specify the pathing here. I'm just going to set a working directory for the steps so that it runs in the right directory.
Cool. And I did notice a little bit of Copilot happen in the background. So how So how good is Copilot at GitHub Actions suggestions and completions and things?
Yeah, I think it's very helpful, especially if you're doing if you're adding if you already have a job built out, let's say you have the dev job built out, and now you're going to add the prod job, and you're typing it by hand on the keyboard. It does a really good job of kind of understanding that, especially in your workflow file, understands that that context and help you kind of build out the same patterns you have above. So once you kind of have a workflow file created, it is really good at helping just recreate those patterns. It also is really helpful at just filling in the blanks on. You might have saw it try to run .source, which is a very common source directory path. So yeah, it does often have some really good suggestions as well, as long as using Copilot chat to help ask any questions.
Yeah, because my first thought would be if I wanted to use Copilot chat, hey, I want a workflow that does XYZ. Can you create that for me? Or just
oh yeah, yep. And I do it all the time. Do we give me a workflow that deploys the web app to Azure, and it'll give you a really good start.
Totally.
Awesome. All right. Sauce. Yeah, for sure. All right, so I'm gonna add a few more steps here. .NET build, and we'll run that in the same working directory. There is a parameter that I could define the working directory as a kind of kind of preset this at the job level. But I am going to it'd be under default working directory. Yeah, so so here's Copilot suggesting what for every run command, I can specify a working directory. I'm not going to specify that, but just know that you can specify some defaults for like the working directory. So I wouldn't have to do this every single time if I didn't want to. All right, so cool. .NET build, .NET test. Copilot's kind of helping me with the pattern here. So I'm doing pretty much the same exact thing, except that my path here is different this time. You notice it's .tests. That's where my test project is at. So it makes sense. And then we'll run one last one, the .NET publish, and do the working directory. All right, cool. So that's looking pretty good. This will run, .NET restore, .NET build, .NET test, .NET publish. So that's great, but because this is running in a GitHub hosted runner, like a cloud hosted runner essentially, or even if it's running self-hosted, I want to get those artifacts, the build artifacts, and publish them to the workflow so that I can, one, review them. Then two, that later we want to deploy this to a environment. So let's add in. If we go back to the GitHub Actions marketplace, there is a upload artifacts action from GitHub, or maybe artifact. I think it's artifact, not artifacts. Upload artifact. Yep, upload build artifact. So we can click into this, and this is just rendering the README. So we can look at the README here for like how this is used. So I'll copy this in as a good starting point. And so again, because we're using YAML, white space matters. So you can see that I just pasted this in, and because I'm not following the same spacing here, it airs out. So I want to make sure that my spaces are all lined up. So all my steps are all aligned here. And I just need to modify this. So let's do. We're gonna upload the .publish. We're gonna call this just publish, I suppose, and then the path to this will be this /publish. I want to add one more step in here though. When you run the .NET publish command, it's going to output the results of the publish to just a folder. I like to zip that because it's a little bit more performance when you upload and download an artifact. Just less files. You're just uploading a single zip file. Then uploading a bundle of files. So let's add in the zip command here. So we'll do this, I think, zip -r, and we'll do github.workspace /space/publish.zip, and then we're going to do. I want to set the working directory in this one as well. So we're going to run it in this, and then we want to set this to. I'm not sure why all of these are failing. It was just my code space. So yes, we want to set all of these to, or this. I'm just going to upload or zip up the root here, and send this to. So yes, so let's talk about this again. I'm going to create the zip and publish it to publish.zip in my GitHub workspace in the roots, and then I'm going to zip up everything in the current folder, but the working directory should be this. Should be the publish folder that we specified before. So when I publish this to Azure, the zip and structure, the folder structure is important that I don't have a separate a subfolder inside of my zip. Otherwise, that won't get published to my website correctly. All right, cool. So let's run this. I'm gonna have to change this. I just want to publish the publish.zip. That lines up. Publish.zip. Publish.zip. Cool. All right, so let's make a commit and let's see what this works. So updating workflow commit. I will push that. I will refresh this and go back here. All right, cool. Because we already have the open pull request, it's going to run every time you do another push to the pull request, it knows to run that, because if you're changing your app, you want to make sure that it still builds and your test still passes. So in the pull request, we can see that the job is running here. If I click the details button, it'll take us right to our workflow. So we can let this build for a second.
The yellow wheel of doom.
I know. Yep.
But I am glad that this progress window is there. I feel like that's been there from day one of GitHub Actions. So yeah,
for sure.
It's nice to see that it's only improved with time.
So let's come on .NET Restore. It was taking a little bit long for me earlier when I was testing this, so maybe about a minute and a half or so. But we'll let it run, and then if there's any errors, we can see if there's any what we need to fix.
Cool. And it might also be because you're sharing your screen, and usually when I share my screen for something,
if you're demoing something, then it's never going to be fast. So.
That plus the demo gods, it's just like. It's like, oh, you're trying to talk about perf and speed today? No, we can't have that. That's
exactly. If you did find that your restore or your npm install steps were taking a long time, there's an actions cache action that you can add into your workflow that will it'll cache like your NuGet folder or your node modules folder for npm. So that can help save a lot of time in your builds as well by caching the builds.
Gotcha.
Or caching your dependencies. I mean.
Cool. And you can have multiple jobs be triggered at the same time, right?
Oh yes, exactly. Yep, exactly. So if my coworker had a pull request as well, and we wanted to make sure, let's say we had a policy that your app had to build and test successfully in order for it to pass a pull request, they can run concurrently. Those workflows can run concurrently.
Awesome.
Cool. And wow, it never happens to me the first time. It looks like all of our tests passed, or all of our steps passed successfully. So that's really exciting. So what we did here, the extra piece that we did here with the zip. So this is zipping up that publish directory, and then we're uploading that artifact so that it can be stored at the build level. So if we look at our summary page, we notice another little drop down here. We have an artifact, so our publish. So I could click this and download this to my machine, and this will be or this is my zip file now of my publish command. So this is really helpful. Publishing the file is very helpful for one, we want to deploy it now, but two, like if I want to see if something's like not working correctly, just publish the folder and you can take a look at it locally.
Great. Yeah, I like that this hub exists.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, makes it very easy to figure out what went wrong and things.
Yeah, yep.
And I'm missing anyone who has the ability to submit PRs to a given repo that has actions attached to it. Can they view the same experience, or is the experience?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Anyone who has at least or anyone who has read access to a repo will be able to see like this page and everything. If you have write access, of course, then you'll be able to create pull requests and things like that, or create branches and pull requests. So oftentimes we'll have people who or we'll have repositories, and then the repository will have like branch protection settings on it so that people can't edit the default workflow in the main branch. Just like any other piece of code, you create a pull request, you have it reviewed, and then push that to main.
Cool.
All right. So what's next? I think we need to add in a dev environment to start deploying this to an Azure environment, or deploy to the cloud. So as a pro tip from this page, though, if you want to get back to your workflow file, like you could, in the web, you could, go back to code and navigate to it. But you can also click this workflow file button here. This will take you right to the workflow that has ran for this particular job. And we can click the pencil button and then just start editing right here. So in the case where you're trying to get something to work and you're doing edit, watching it run, that can be a quick tip on help you get back to editing quicker.
Great. Yeah, it's the little things that matter.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right, so I'm back to my code space. Let's add another job here. So we want to be in the same level as build. So I can collapse build for a second and call this one dev. And then so here's Copilot in action here, helping us a little bit with our what we want. So we'll accept the suggestion and then modify it a little bit, actually a lot of it, but that's okay. So let's talk about what it added though. So it named, gave us a display name. It's optional. If we didn't add this, it would just call it dev, which is fine as well. It built in a needs parameter here. So I want to comment this out for just a second, and then comment these out for just a second. And I want to publish this, or I'll push this and show you what it's doing. So let's just add another job, push. So if we head back to the web, we can watch the action job. It should trigger a new job, a new run. All right. So because I commented out the needs keyword here, both of these jobs are going to run in parallel. Mm-hmm. So in our case, it's not what we want, but there are some cases where you might want to have multiple jobs run in parallel. Let's say like you had like a lint job and a security scan job, and you might want that to run in parallel with the build job, for example. So there are definitely cases where you have jobs that do different things run at the same time. But in our case, we need the build job to succeed, then run the dev job, and then let's say run the prod job or something like that. All right, cool. So I just want to show the parallelism here. Now, if I change this to, if I uncomment this, and it's an array here as well, so I could put this on here and specify multiple jobs to depend on, to need. So let's just say add needs, do a push. Now, if we head back to our workflow, we should have a fourth one here in a moment. Yep. And now we have that kind of tree here, or that our visualization where our build job runs, and in order for our dev job to run, this one needs to finish and be successful. If this one fails, then the dev job won't run.
Cool. So this is a very easy looking map, but I'm assuming you can have branches all over the place.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And we'll see that. I'll see that a lot as well. We'll have a build job, and then you can kind of like fan out and fan in. Like let's say you have like three QA environments, you can have all three QA environments deployed at the same time, and then we only have one prod, so then prod kind of flows back down.
Nice.
Cool. Awesome. All right, so let's go back to our workflows. I just had a few things. I know I need to change this from 2 to 3 because 2 is the old version. It gave me a warning down here. It says this action is an older action, so I'm going to flip that to 3. If I didn't know which action, or what is the latest version of an action, or I guess just what the inputs are for it, you might have noticed that I'm referencing the uses keyword here, action/download artifact. So basically all this is an org in GitHub, and then this is the repo. So if I copy this and I go to github.com/action/download artifact, this takes me to the repository. So it's very easy to kind of tie back to where the code is that you're running. It's just org name/repo name. And then we can either look at the releases page to see what's the latest version, or we can look at the tags and see what's the latest version. So there's a couple of V2 tags, but also V3 is the latest, so I'll use the V3.
Great. And this is how you'd reference like any of those actions that you were browsing in the marketplace earlier? Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And then oftentimes it's just a README. So usually the README will have like, how to run their action, for example. But if there are some actions that have a lot of like hidden switches, like, do this, don't do this, etc. So all the configuration, all the metadata for actions in the marketplace are contained in the action.yaml file for that action. So we can see the 3 different input options, I guess 2 different input options we have for the download artifact. It's very simple, just name and path. Mm-hmm. But then there are some actions, like if we go back to the actions checkout action, there are a lot of inputs, and we don't have to provide any of them because they all have defaults. But there are a lot of hidden inputs here that can get very very specific and very advanced on if we want the repo to clean before it runs the clone command, and fetch depth and things like that. So basically, if you want to look at all the input for an action, look at the action.yaml file.
Cool, that makes sense.
All right, so we are going to download the publish artifact that we published in our build step. So we call the publish there, and then we are going to, let's see, we want to just have a download to the root, so we don't need that. Let's add in or uncomment the Azure login action. And we're going to use creds here. So in my repository, I already set up, if I go to my settings for my repository, I go to secrets and variables and actions. We have a couple different things here. We have environment secrets, but we don't have any environments yet, so we'll get to that. But we also have repository secrets and organization level secrets. So this is a repository level secret that I created earlier that has my clients, my app registration, my SPN in Azure, Entra for me to use to deploy my web app to Azure. So it has like my client ID, client secrets, tenant ID, things like that. So I created that ahead of time. We also have variables for non-secret type of secrets, like things we might need to like store and change, but don't need to be encrypted and anyone can see the value of. So this is what variables are used for. So secrets are just like in Azure DevOps. Once we save it, we can't retrieve it. You can change it, you can't change it or can't retrieve it. It's encrypted. It's starred out. Then variable, if we were to create like a variable here, if I called it like web server URL or something, I don't know. And we did just GitHub.com. If I added the variable, then we'll be able to see the variable in what the value is just from our browser here. Cool. All right, so we have Azure credentials set, and then we can use our web app deploy action here. So I have a website in Azure as well. So if I look at my my resource group in Azure, we can see my website or my web app is this one, or this name. So app name is this. I'm not using a publish profile, so I can get rid of that parameter because we're logging into Azure ahead of time with our credentials we're specifying. You could use a publish profile with the secrets to deploy, but it's recommended to use like an app registration or a service principal for that. And then package, I want to just simply specify my publish.zip file that it's downloading, and away we go. All right, so let's see if this works. Let's deploy web app to Azure, commit, publish, push. All right, so that will, if we go back to actions, do a new run. Cool. We have our two jobs again, our build job, then our deploy job.
Awesome.
Yeah. While this is running, I have one thing that I want to kind of show. So this trips people up sometimes if they're new to action. So I made changes here because I forgot to put this put the needs keyword here so that the dev job runs after the build job. So okay, I pushed my changes and now I want to rerun it. So I see there's a rerun jobs button up here. So let's try that. Let's rerun the job. But it still doesn't have that dependency, right? Like that's kind of weird.
Right.
So what it's doing is it's rerunning the job with the same same inputs that originally triggered the job. So it knows which commit hash originally triggered the job. So it's going to rerun the job based on that commit hash. So since our workflow file, we need to do a new commit and new push, it's not going to have the changes here.
Good stuff.
So it's just the rerun job is useful. Like let's say if you have let's say your web server is down when you did a deploy and now it's up, so we can just rerun it. Or a secret wasn't correct. Those are good use cases of rerunning the job, then it'll work. But if you made changes to your workflow file, you have to rerun a new run of that essentially.
That makes sense. Cool. And I'm assuming those jobs rerunning that can be automated too.
If they fail.
Yeah. Maybe wait a couple, if the server was down, for instance.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I guess if the job fails and it's going to kick back. Essentially, if there's any non-zero exit code anywhere, it's going to kick back the job and it'll show you the logs and you can rerun it yourself. There's some instances where maybe you have you build in your PowerShell script or Bash script, like recharge logic. If your website's flaky, that's how I would handle it, something like that.
Okay.
Cool. And amazingly enough, we didn't typo anything, I don't think. So it looks like our website's deployed, web app deployed. If I click the link here, it will spin up the instance or simply called instance. And hey, we have a website.
Yay.
Exciting. Yeah, very nice.
I like it.
All right. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so far we're doing really great. We have our build job, publishing .NET app, running .NET publish command. Then our deploy job is taking that and deploying it to Azure. So there's a few things I want to add into this to make it just a little bit nicer. So I want to add in the environment keyword, and I'm going to add in the name, dev, and then the URL. So the URL kind of shows a nice little button for you to click of what the website looks like. So I could copy the URL here and just kind of have it hard coded. But I know that this Azure web app step. If I look up this in GitHub, just show this very quickly. If I look at probably somewhere in the README has it, but if I just simply go to the action.yaml file, I know it has an output of web app URL. So it knows of, basically it knows of which web app you're deploying to, and it knows how to get the URL for that. So I can very simply use the keyword here for steps. We're using an output from a step. So steps dot, and this is deploy probably, steps dot deploy dot outputs dot, and it's even trying to help me a little bit, web app URL. Again, I don't know why those are coming up. But so yeah, here's my web app URL, and this will show up what my web app is, the URL for that. And we added an environment for name. So if the environment doesn't exist, which doesn't exist today, it'll create it for me. And then, so let's just run this. So add environment. I want to show you how it's a little bit different, maybe. All right, so if I head back to my job here, so let this load for a second. And while that loads, I can show a little bit about I guess the environment won't be created until that job runs. So I'll just let this load for a second. .NET build's running. And from this page as well, let's look at a previous run. We can, if you're running into issues, you can search the logs for a particular, keyword that might help you, or you can click this and download the logs and look at them locally as well. So if you're debugging an error, sometimes it's tricky to know what happened. Sometimes I'll do like an ls. I'll run an ls command to list out the folder structure. For particular in my job, so if I know which folder to zip, for example, so sometimes you just need to run like an ls to know what's happening or look at the logs.
Great.
Cool. So because I used an environment now, you notice that this looks a little bit different. This step here, so it uses little kind of have like a loading bar here of when my deployment is running. So that's one difference between using just a regular job and adding an environment for a job. And also we notice we have this URL here that shows, so I can just click this URL, and of course it'll take me right back to my website.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So cool. So now we have an environment here for dev. So I could have created it ahead of time. So like, for example, I can create prod here now if I want. And I'll go back to dev. We can add a couple things here. So reviewers. So if you need to have approvals before you get to an environment, before it deploys to an environment, you can add that here. So maybe you don't want to. Maybe you let people deploy to dev automatically, but you have a protection on prod where you should have an approver before it deploys to prod, your manager or the lead in your team or something. You can add them to the environments, and then they have to be the approver in order to approve that deployment. There's a couple of checkboxes here, like on prevent self-review. So if I'm the one who created the deployment, I can't approve it. And you can also add up to 5 different reviewers names, or you can add in a team here as well. So I'll save this. These are protection rules. You can also protect environments based on branches or tags. So you could say hey, we can't deploy to the prod environment unless it comes from the main branch. So I can try to help prevent people from accidentally deploying to prod from their feature branch, let's say. So that can be helpful as well. All right, so now if we go back to our Actions tab, I can go back to my workflow. And I haven't showed this yet, but let's run this manually. But no, actually, we can't run it manually because we're still in the pull request for our workflow. Interestingly enough, the workflow dispatch event, because there's no workflow in the default branch, it doesn't. It's not allowed to have it run manually. So one thing we'll have to do in order for us to be able to trigger our workflow manually for the first time is merge this pull request. So you can see all my commits here. Looking good so far. So I'll confirm the merge. And now if I go back to the Actions tab and click on my workflow, now because this event appears in the default branch, I can now click the Run Workflow button here. So again, very helpful to be able to run the workflow manually if you want to kick off a build or kick off a deployment, for example. And then you can customize this with inputs if you have different inputs that you want people to fill in order for a job to run. So I just clicked the Run Workflow, and then boom, this one's now manually ran by me. So if we click into this, wait for this one to finish. Run.NET Build, run.NET Test, very good. Because we added the approval, once it finishes the build job and gets to the deployed job, it's going to ask me for an approval. So I want to show kind of how that interface looks. Cool. So it sent me an email as well as a notification in my GitHub user. So there's a big yellow banner here that kind of makes it very obvious that I need to review this, and this is the environment that's waiting on and who it's waiting, the approver is waiting on. So I click the Review Deployments button and then check the environment that I'm approving and say dev looks good and approve and deploy. So that kind of that interface, so that kind of how it works is very similar to Azure Pipelines, where you have a job that's waiting on approval. The person gets an email and come out here and click the button to approve it, add a comment, and away you go.
Great. Yes, hopefully that action runs successfully.
Yeah. Yep. I didn't show under environments, so now that I have 2 environments, it's very useful. So we have org level secrets and repo level secrets, but we also have environment level secrets. So if I had a connection string, for example, that was different in dev than it was in prod, this is where you can add in the environment secret here, and then when it's running under the context of the correct environment, it will use the environment secret here that that is different than the other environment secret.
Awesome. Yeah, so clearly it's pretty easy to set up those environment secrets and give access to the right folks when it comes to approval and all that. So
for sure.
Awesome. Well, so we are a little short on time at this point, but is there anything else that you want to quickly share before we close out?
No, I think we nailed it. Just very lastly, we have our deployments here. So I only have my one environment, but it's just very easy to come out here and if someone asks you what's the latest deployment in dev, or what's the latest deployment in prod, you use the environments tab and come out here and answer that question. Oh yeah, the prod was last deployed. In this case, dev was last deployed 2 minutes ago with this commit hash.
Great.
Yep. But always with GitHub Actions, I find it's a little bit daunting at first, especially if you're brand new to YAML. But the more you play around, the more you get familiar with YAML and how Actions works, the kind of more comfortable you'll be, and be able to do some awesome things.
Totally. And yeah, I mean, there's an extension for that as well in VS Code, which we were using a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely recommend for folks to go check that out, especially if you're not someone who likes to directly edit on GitHub proper. Or maybe do both. So why not? Cool. Other than that, there's plenty of other links that you shared that we'll update the show notes with in post with. So in case you want to go check that all out. But otherwise,
awesome.
I probably just safely Google GitHub Actions, right? And I'm sure you get some.
Oh yeah. I actually do have a few things for kind of next steps or like learning if that's helpful for folks. There's I'll just go through very quickly. There's a skills.github.com that has some kind of self-learning that you can kind of follow along with on, hello GitHub Actions. So pretty much what we did deploying to Azure. There's more advanced topics like reusable workflows and custom actions. So there's a couple of different modules on there. There's, if you're familiar with the Microsoft Learn modules, there's several, actually a lot of GitHub learning paths out there for working with GitHub Actions, automating your workflow, and kind of walking through those as well. So that can be very helpful.
Great. And then finally, can folks reach out to you on Twitter or X or whatever it's called?
Yeah. Feel free to mention me or send me a message, and glad to help and help you get started with Actions.
Awesome. I gotta say, your Twitter handle, it reminds me of this old show I used to watch called JJ the Jet Plane as a kid. I say watch, but really it freaked me out. But
that's what the handle's based on.
Yeah, okay, great.
I love trains, so yeah, so I just modified
that makes sense. Cool, because that was immediately where my brain went to. But it's like, but it says train, so I don't know if it's it rhymes with plane. So
yeah, it's close.
Great. Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was really cool. It's been a minute since we talked about GitHub Actions on this show. So I love getting to see how much it's really expanded in recent years. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see what's next with it.
Awesome. Yeah, it's exciting. It's a lot of fun things in the roadmap. So keep an eye out.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for watching. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out to myself or Josh. And until next time, happy coding, y'all. See you later.
Take care. Thank you again.